I argue this could have been our leadoff tonight because I think this is a huge story. The fact that on a night that there was basketball everywhere, including national basketball on TNT, so it wasn't like there was not anything on. The Four Nations NHL game between Canada and US, which I know nothing about hockey, and even I was watching this game, had the most viewership ever viewed for a national hockey game ever.
Yes. I don't think this actually, as far as I know, this wasn't an NHL game. Because this was during their All-Star break.
But it's still part of the National Hockey League.
Yes. It had NHL players, but I think this was outside of the NHL. It took the place of the All-Star weekend.
Yeah, but again, it's part of the NHL because it was broadcasted by ESPN because of their broadcasting rights with the NHL.
But either way, the game was incredible,
yes.
And the U.S. and Canada put on an absolute show. Jordan Binnington must love playing in pressure situations at the TD Garden because he turned back into the 2019 version of himself when the Blues beat the Bruins in 7 games in the 2019.
Sean McDonough mentioned that a couple times. And for the record, again, this is the first time I've really ever watched a majority of a hockey game in a long time. I thought Sean McDonough is right up there with Doc Emmerich. I mean, I thought he was fantastic on the microphone for ESPN. And I thought the NHL really did a good job introducing its players. And again, as I mentioned last week, I think this works for hockey. I think this is a success for hockey. I think patriotism and the Four Nations and stuff, because hockey has always been a Canadian sport. This is how much I know about hockey, Josh. I really did not know Sidney Crosby was on Team Canada.
Yeah.
I did not know that. So, like, hockey has always been the Canadian sport. The Canadians have always felt like that was their edge over the United States. That's why I feel like it does work in hockey. You had a very emotional environment in a hockey town in Beantown, the TD Garden in Boston. I think it works for hockey. There's a lot of talk about should the NBA or even the NFL Pro Bowl try to duplicate this. No, leave this alone. This will work for hockey. This is hockey's thing. It's clearly worked. I think they should run it back a year from now. And I do think that, for the record, not to bring politics into it, but what's going on right now between Canada and U.S. with their prime ministers and our president, I do think that stuff does matter, and I think it's brought into this a little bit. I don't think it would work for the NBA because, as I said last week, I don't feel like the NBA players care as much about the pride of defending U.S. versus Canada because it's always been a U.S. sport, where hockey to me is seen as a Canadian sport. That to me is a big difference.
So they won't be able to run it next year because you got the Winter Olympics.
Oh, okay. That's why they were talking about 2 years from now, maybe running it back.
Yes, because you got the Winter Olympics. So that's going to cause a natural...
Well, the Winter Olympics is basically Four Nations as well, though, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, because everybody goes and plays for their home country.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it was an incredible game to watch, and of course, it was McDavid that scored the game-winning goal. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy last year in the Stanley Cup Final, even though the Oilers lost the series. That's how good Connor McDavid is. And, you know, you're talking about how good Sean McDonough was on the broadcast for the championship. He was just as good for Game 7 between the Oilers and Panthers last year for the Stanley Cup Final, which I think... Those 2 games, Four Nations Final and Panthers-Oilers Game 7, were pretty close in terms of viewership, if I remember reading.
I think the Four Nations got a couple million more. I think the Panthers-Florida game, I think, got 7 million. I think the Four Nations got 9 million. There's 2 things to this. Number one, this number for the NHL, especially hockey, is tremendous. I mean, the NBA Finals, unless it includes Lakers, Cavs, will probably not reach this number. Um,
No.
the other thing though, and here's the thing about hockey, the NHL, as great as everybody talked about hockey for 3-4 days, the fact we are talking about this because we only do a show once a week on a Tuesday show. If we did a daily show, we would have talked about this on Thursday, we would have talked about it on Friday, and it would have been the end of it. The NHL, to me, though, still has work to do where it's like they need to capitalize on this momentum. They need to make hockey more mainstream. And it's like it sort of was like this happened, and now everybody goes back to their respective corners and starts talking football off season.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? You talk about how hockey is the Canadian sport. A Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup in like 30 years or
Yeah,
something. It's crazy. Edmonton almost did, but because they came back from a 3-0 deficit to force a game 7, but of course they lost to the Panthers. Um, and before that, the last Canadian team to reach the Cup final was Montreal in 2021 when they lost to Tampa Bay in 5 games in a really weird series where both teams were from the Eastern Conference. And yeah, it was just kind of strange in that sense. Um,
you know what I found personally, and again, this is coming from a non-hockey guy. This is probably why I still have an issue with hockey. I think hockey can be really exhilarating, really exciting for the last 5 minutes slash overtime of a really close, intense game. I don't think hockey gets exciting until really that point where it's sort of late in the game. And I still think it's very hard to find the damn puck.
I think that's partially because you're not as avid of a hockey fan as somebody like me. Like I find it very easy to follow the puck, and that's partially because I go to a lot of games and I watch games on TV, so I able to identify it. But I can understand your issue. Like maybe on TV they should put like a yellow circle around the puck,
They
something
really
like
should. It would make it so much easier.
yeah, because it's this little black thing on the ice.